Welcome to the Self-Growth Nerds podcast. I'm your host, Marie, a courage coach, creative soul, and adventure seeker. Since through hiking the Pacific Crest Trail in 2019, I'm on a mission to help you embrace your most confident self so you can achieve your dreams too. If you're eager for deep conversations, big questions, and meaningful connections, join me on the quest to discovering how we can create a more magical and memorable life. Hello nerds! How are you? So, the universe wanted to test me since I recorded the last episode. And I can confirm that I'm not always confident. Yesterday I went to get a latte at my local coffee shop and there was a bunch of customers hanging out in the parking lot. I sat there with them and two of the people I knew introduced me to a new person I'd never met before. And I watched myself become so awkward and self-conscious with an undertone of desperate, please love me. This was a reminder that growth is not linear. Confidence is not a destination, but a state of being. I wondered, why is it that just a month ago I was super confident on that film shoot, and now I'm shriveled up inside me at the coffee shop? I'll tell you what I found out, but first, go ahead and think of a situation in which you felt confident, and another one in which you felt insecure. Think of recent weeks or months, and pinpoint one situation in which you were confident, and one in which you were insecure. You can pause me if needed. So, I believe that what makes the difference is whether you feel like you belong or you feel like you need to fit in. In her book, Braving the Wilderness, my ultimate hero, Brené Brown, explains that, quote, belonging is being somewhere where you want to be and they want you. Fitting in is being somewhere where you want to be, but they don't care one way or the other. I belonged on the film shoot not only because I wanted to be there, but because I was literally chosen to be there and they needed me. Therefore, I was confident. Versus, I tried to fit in at the cafe because I wanted to be there, but didn't make a difference to them whether I was or not. The first few years I worked at summer camp, I wanted to fit in so much. There was a bunch of staff members, and my presence didn't make a difference there, or at least I believed it didn't. They could have replaced me easily. Therefore, I was quite self-conscious and insecure. Only once I started finding my place, hearing comments like, oh, we're gonna put Marie on the arts camp, she's gonna be really good at it. Only then, I started feeling confident. And by the time I was on the management team, I showed up with full confidence because people knew me and I felt like I was needed there. So where in your life do you belong? Belonging feels calm, solid, and secure. And where in your life do you attempt or crave to fit in? In which areas of your life do you feel a hint of desperate energy? Fitting in feels awkward and controlling. Do you belong or fit in? At home, in your relationship, with your friends, in your family, at work, at the gym? How does that have an impact on how you show up in those places? The desire to fit in can make us fall into our primitive brain, where we assess in a millisecond whether someone is stronger or weaker than we are, and we act accordingly. If I meet someone I look up to or I admire and I'm not careful, I can fall into my primitive brain and deem myself as less than, change who I am looking to them for acceptance. Notice though how this person didn't have to do anything for me to act this way. It all happened in my brain. I might have seen them come out of a fancy car, for example, or I might be impressed with what they have accomplished in their life. I remember on the Pacific Crest Trail when I learned after 1 week of hiking together and camping together, that one of my closest trail friends was an ER doctor. I knew in that moment that I wouldn't have acted as my weird and silly self around him had I known this fact before. That's crazy, isn't it? The belief or a subconscious belief that doctors are superior is part of our social conditioning. This is the soil that we grow up in and the unconscious beliefs that are within us and that we have to bring to the surface in order to deconstruct, just like racism, sexism, and more. The same goes with someone I would have deemed inferior to me in my quest to fit in. Without noticing, I might show up around them in a way that's slightly arrogant or just a bit dismissive. There is nothing to be ashamed of here. It's normal animal behavior that we can change by raising our level of self-awareness and, most of all, our level of self-love. Our level of self-love or compassion for ourselves makes it so we can belong anywhere. We don't have to wait for the years of experience to pile up, or for validating sentences or accepting gestures in order to create a sense of belonging. External evidence and other people's open arms facilitate belonging for sure. That being said, true belonging, in the words of Brené Brown, quote, is the spiritual practice of believing in and belonging to yourself so deeply that you can share your most authentic self with the world and find sacredness in both being a part of something and standing alone in the wilderness. True belonging doesn't require you to change who you are. It requires you to be who you are. Imagine if you could show up as your full, imperfect, and eccentric self as a complete newbie in a crowd of experienced people you admire. If you arrived and you said, "I know nothing and I'm excited to learn," that to me is ultimate confidence. There is no shame in being a beginner. I remember reading about someone who interned for Stephen Colbert, and when they met him, they introduced themselves as, "Oh, I'm just an intern." And I'm not sure what exactly he replied, but it was something along the lines of, "You're not just an intern, you're here. You have a role to play just like I do." Just like when I met someone on a trail and they'd go, "Oh, I'm just a section hiker." What do you mean? You're here, you're hiking, you're sweating, you're getting dirty. The number of miles you hike has nothing to do with your worth as a person. And don't believe anyone, especially yourself, who tells you otherwise. Whether you hike 5 miles or 2,000 miles, you're just as worthy. Instead of being ashamed, be proud of where you're at instead of focusing on where you want to be or what you think is more virtuous or more successful. This will be a gift to yourself and to everyone that you meet. This stuff is contagious. Earlier this year, I spoke with the wife of a friend who's in the first years of building her business, just like me. And she said, "Oh, I just made X amount of dollars so far." And for some reason, she seemed embarrassed of that number. Little did she know, though, that it was higher than what I had made. If I was feeling insecure that day, I might have let her shame get to me. And the opposite is also true. When I meet people who dare to embrace their imperfections and to own proudly where they're at on their journey, it makes it easier for me to also embrace my imperfections and to own proudly where I'm at on my journey, regardless of where I aim to be or where I think I should be. When we want to fit in, we essentially aim to win or to be part of the winners and leave the losers behind. We try to play a finite game, just like sports. There is a winner and therefore there must be a loser. But most of life is not a finite game. It's what Simon Sinek calls an infinite game, and he wrote a book with that title. In an infinite game, quote, "the players come and go, the rules are changeable, and there is no defined endpoint. There are no winners or losers in an infinite game. There is only ahead and behind." I love this. Don't you think this sort of game lends itself to love and collaboration a lot more than one in which you need to outsmart your peers and push people aside to rise to the top? It also brings me back to a quote I love from The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky, in which Charlie, the main character, says, "In that moment, I swear we were infinite. To me, these moments are when you do not feel separate from others. You feel at one with yourself and connected to all of humanity. Similar to what Karen Quinn describes at one point in her book, True Hiking Will Break Your Heart, when she says she was lying on the ground, exhausted, and the bugs crawling on top of her just felt as though they were a part of her. And out of context, this sounds a bit gross, now that I think of it, but it's beautiful at the same time. It's a rare feeling of pure harmony. Think of the last time you felt this way. Where were you? What were you doing? How can you cultivate this rich, connected state of being with yourself in small daily ways? It's a challenge to love ourselves, isn't it? Sometimes I think it's so freaking boring and it feels like a waste of my time. But then I realize that when I'm softer to myself, I'm softer to others. I see the good in them. I feel more connected. I attract more opportunities. I have no headache, no stomach burn, and best of all, my jokes are funnier. When I take time to be with myself and to love myself and to give myself a pat on the back, my jokes get funnier. So maybe it's worth the time and the boredom. Let me tell you some of the things I do as part of my very imperfect self-love practice. First, I try to meditate, but I'm quite restless, so it doesn't always work. But when at work, I love it. I also go for walks. I light up a cedar-smelling candle and listen to Tara Brach, the sweetest soul and the softest voice on the market. She's the woman that wrote the books Radical Acceptance and Radical Compassion. You should go and listen to her because her voice is magical. I also pull oracle cards and I journal a lot about everything I have, everything I've done, who I am, what I'm grateful for, the impact I want to have, the people around me, what makes me feel good. I just get to know myself on paper. I give myself the benefit of the doubt and I try to turn the volume down on the inner critic. I pour love into my cracks. How can you pour love into your cracks? My brain just pictured a butt crack. But if you want to pour love onto your butt crack, you can. Feel free to. Let's make a pact together, okay? Let's agree not to use sentences like, I'm new at this. I hope they like me. I hope I have what it takes. Oh, I'm just X, Y, and Z. While they seem factual and harmless, these thoughts create feelings of inadequacy that lead us to try and fit in. And you know what happens when we try to fit in? Nothing good happens. Instead, let's create feelings of determination and connection by thinking sentences like, I'm here to learn. I'm doing this. I belong here. And I'm going to end this episode with one last quote from Brené Brown, all right? She wrote, someone, somewhere will say don't do it. You don't have what it takes to survive the wilderness. This is when you reach deep into your wild heart and remind yourself, I am the wilderness. Have a beautiful week, my friends. You just listened to the Self-Growth Nerds podcast. Make sure to subscribe and to find me on Instagram at Self-Growth Nerds. If you want individual help developing the confidence to create a more meaningful and exciting life, visit selfgrowthnerds.com today to learn how. Finally, I want to thank my friend Etienne Galano for editing this, and I want to thank you, kind-hearted souls, for growing into your truest, most courageous selves every day and making this world a better, more beautiful place. My name is Marie, and I will talk to you next week.